My son and daughter-in-law screamed that there was no space for an old parasite like me before throwing me out. They thought tossing me onto the street with 2 trash bags would break me, but while shivering in a cheap motel, I remembered I paid the deposit on that house. By the time they realized the parasite had become the surgeon cutting them out of my will, it was too late to say sorry. My name is Loretta Hayes, and at 68 years old, I had become a ghost in my own life. I lived in a quiet subdivision of Ridgeview, Colorado, in a 2-story beige house that smelled permanently of lemon polish and unsaid words. Every morning at 6 o'clock, my feet hit the cold hardwood floor before the sun even touched the window. I moved through the hallway like a shadow, picking up the sharp plastic edges of my grandson's building blocks so no one would step on them. I brewed the dark roast coffee exactly how my son, Daniel, liked it, and I started the eggs. When Daniel and his wife, Monica, came down, they drank the coffee and ate the eggs, but they never really looked at me. To them, the breakfast appeared by magic, and I was just part of the furniture. It had not always been this way. For 30 years, I was the first face people saw at the Bright River Community Clinic. I managed schedules, calmed terrified patients, and balanced the books down to the last penny. When I retired, I made a choice that felt like love, but was actually a contract signed in invisible ink. I sold my small, paid-off bungalow and handed over a check for $80,000, the majority of my life savings, to help Daniel put the down payment on this larger house. I thought we were building a family home. Monica, who worked as a human resources manager at Urban Haven stores, had a way of making my presence feel like a burden she was graciously tolerating. She would lean against the quartz countertop, sipping the coffee I made, and smile that tight, corporate smile. "It really is better you are here. Loretta," she would say, her voice smooth. "Think of how much money we are saving by not putting you in a nursing home. Though, at your age, you really should think about simplifying even more. Do you really need all those old coats I tried to contribute? When the first winter bill came, high from the heating, I pulled $200 from my small pension check and offered it to her. Oh, stop it. Mom, Monica had said, waving a manicured hand. We do not need your little bit of money. Put it away. I felt grateful then. But a week later, I heard her whispering to Daniel in the laundry room. She just sits there. Daniel. It is like having a permanent guest who does not know when to leave. We are carrying her dead weight while she hoards her pension. I wanted to walk in and scream that my $80,000 was the reason they were not renting an apartment. But I stayed silent. I retreated to my room on the first floor. Even that sanctuary was shrinking. Slowly. Monica had started storing things in my closet. First it was winter coats, then boxes of holiday decorations. Then Daniel moved his old weight set into the corner of my room because the garage was full. I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, surrounded by their clutter, pushed into a small corner of a house I technically owned. I closed my eyes and remembered the years I worked double shifts, standing until my ankles swelled, just to buy Daniel his first computer or pay for his college applications. I had endured that exhaustion because I believed that raising a good son meant I would never be lonely in my old age. That was the unspoken deal of motherhood. I remembered the day we signed the closing papers for this house. The lawyer, a man with kind eyes, had paused before sliding the documents toward me. "Mrs. Hayes," he had said, lowering his voice. "I am going to list you as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship. and we are documenting your initial contribution here. It protects you. Do not lose this copy." I had nodded and filed it away in my wooden keepsake box, though now, amidst the stress and the clutter, I could not quite remember where I had tucked that specific folder. The tension in the house snapped tight during dinner that evening. We were eating roast chicken. The only sound the scraping of forks against ceramic. Monica put her glass down a little too hard. "You know," she said, looking at the ceiling instead of me. "I was reading an article about modern living spaces. This house, it just feels so tight lately. 3 adults is a lot for one roof. It is suffocating." I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to defend me, to mention my contribution, to say anything. "Daniel," I whispered, Do you feel that way too?" Daniel kept his eyes on his plate, pushing a green bean in circles. He did not look up. He did not speak. In his silence, I heard the loudest sound in the world, the sound of a door beginning to close. The sound hit me first, a chaotic wall of noise that made my heart hammer against my ribs. The television in the living room was blasting cartoons at maximum volume, the shrill voices of animated characters screaming over the thumping bass. But even that could not drown out the sound of ripping plastic. I walked into the hallway and froze. Monica was in my bedroom, her arms moving in violent, jerky motions as she shoved my clothes into large black trash bags. Daniel stood in the doorway, his face a deep, blotchy red, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "What are you doing?" I gasped, dropping my purse. "Those are my church clothes. Why are you putting them in garbage bags?" Monica did not stop. She grabbed a handful of my sweaters and stuffed them down, the plastic groaning under the strain. "We are clearing the clutter." "Loretta!" she said, her voice sharp and breathless from exertion. "I told you, we need space." I rushed past Daniel, my knees trembling, and looked into my closet. It was bare. The shelf where I kept Henry's old tobacco pipe and the folded flag from his funeral was empty. A cold, hollow sensation opened in my stomach. "Where is Henry's box?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Where are my husband's things?" Monica finally turned to look at me, her eyes hard and unblinking. "I threw them in the dumpster out back this morning. This house is for the living. Loretta, it is not a museum for your dead husband or your dusty memories. You had no right," I screamed, reaching for a bag. "I paid for this room. I paid the deposit for this entire house." Daniel stepped forward then, blocking my path. He looked down at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine hatred in his eyes. "Stop throwing money in my face," Daniel shouted, spit flying from his lips. "Do you know what it is like? The guys at work ask if I am ever going to cut the cord. They laugh because I am 40 years old and still living with my mommy. I am sick of it. So you want me to sleep in the garage?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Like a dog. It is a finished garage." "Loretta, stop being dramatic," Monica snapped, cinching the knot on a trash bag. But honestly, even that is too close right now. I looked between them, the son I had nursed through fevers and the woman I had welcomed as a daughter. I felt the floor tilting beneath me. "If I cannot live in my room, and you do not want me in the garage," I whispered, my hands shaking uncontrollably, "then what am I to you? What am I in this family?" Monica dropped the bag. She stepped close to me, invading my personal space until I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the sweat of her rage. You want to know, she screamed, her face twisting. You are a parasite. An old parasite sucking the life out of our marriage. No space here. Old parasite, leave. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to defend me, to tell her to stop. Instead, he slammed his hand down on the dresser, the sound like a gunshot in the small room. She is right, he yelled. Just go. Mom, just get out before I could process the betrayal. They were moving. Daniel grabbed the handle of my battered suitcase, which they had already packed, and dragged it down the hall. I scrambled after him, clutching the only thing I had managed to save, a small wooden box containing my personal papers and a few photos of Henry. Daniel, please, I cried as he hauled the luggage through the front door and shoved it onto the concrete porch. My name is on the deed. You cannot do this. Monica stood in the doorway, crossing her arms over her chest. A cruel smirk played on her lips. What deed? She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Do you even know where it is? Or did you lose it like you lose your reading glasses? You are old. Loretta, you are confused. No one is going to believe you own anything. I am not confused, I stammered, clutching the wooden box tighter to my chest. Daniel would not look at me. He stared at the driveway, his jaw set. I will pay for a motel for 1 week, he said, his voice flat. I will transfer the money to your account. After that, you have to handle it yourself. This house has no room for you anymore. Across the street, I saw a movement in the window. Mrs. Barbara, my neighbor of 2 years, was peeking through her blinds. I saw the glint of her smartphone raised against the glass. The camera lens pointed directly at us. She was recording. Daniel, I said. One last plea. Go, he said. Monica stepped forward and grabbed the handle of the front door. Don't come back and knock, she hissed. We are done with you. The door slammed shut with a finality that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. I stood there in the biting wind of the late afternoon, 2 black trash bags and a suitcase at my feet, clutching my wooden box like a shield. The lock clicked. I was alone. I drove my 12-year-old sedan aimlessly for an hour, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned the color of old parchment. The city of Ridgeview, which had been my home for decades, suddenly looked like a foreign country where I no longer spoke the language. I eventually pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket, parking in the darkest corner between a dumpster and a donation bin. The engine sputtered and died, leaving me in a silence that felt heavier than the screaming match back at the house. I needed to change out of my church clothes, but I had nowhere to go. I climbed into the back seat, struggling to pull my dress over my head in the cramped space. My elbow hit the window, a sharp pain that made me gasp. I am 68 years old, I whispered to the dark fabric of the car roof. I am 68, and I am changing my underwear in a parking lot like a fugitive. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until it was hard to breathe. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the names of my friends from the church choir. I dialed Sarah, but when her voicemail picked up, my throat closed. Sarah. It is Loretta, I said, my voice shaking. I was just wondering if... Never mind. I hung up. I called 2 others, but the result was the same. How could I tell them? How could I say that my son, the boy they had watched grow up in the front pew, had thrown me away like garbage? I was too ashamed. In America, when you are old and alone, silence is often the only dignity you have left. I barely slept. Every car door slamming nearby made me jump. As soon as the sun rose, I drove to the Sunset Lodge, a motel right next to the highway where the neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. The clerk behind the bulletproof glass took my $45 without looking me in the eye. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The walls were so thin I could hear the game show playing on the television in the next room, and the cough of the man staying there. I went into the bathroom and stared at myself in the cracked mirror. My eyes were puffy, my grey hair a mess. I looked broken. They kicked me out like a dog. I said to my reflection, they did not just evict me, they discarded me. The sadness in my chest began to curdle, turning hot and sour. It was no longer just grief. It was rage. A memory flashed in my mind, sharp and bright. I saw myself sitting at the bank 3 years ago, signing a cashier's check for $80,000. I remembered handing it to the title agent. Monica had been sitting next to me, her hand resting on my arm. She had smiled, but now, looking back, I saw the smirk hidden in the corners of her mouth. "You will always have a room with us, Mom," she had said. "We are a family." It was a lie. They had taken my life savings, my security, and my trust, and they had cashed it all in for a bigger house they never intended to share. I walked over to the bed where I had placed the wooden box I saved. It was the only piece of my history I had left. I opened the lid, my fingers brushing against the photos of Henry, but I pushed them aside. I dug deeper, past the birth certificates and the vaccination records, until I felt the crinkle of thick paper. I pulled out a blue folder from the lawyer's office. It was wrinkled and stained with coffee from years ago, but the text was legible. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. I read aloud, my finger tracing the legal jargon. And an affidavit of contribution granting lifetime residency. I had forgotten. The lawyer had insisted on it. He had seen something in Monica's eyes that I had refused to see. I turned on the small television in the corner to drown out the highway noise. A news program was playing. A special report on legal aid. The reporter was interviewing a weeping elderly man. "Elder financial and housing abuse is the silent epidemic of our time," the reporter said. "Children manipulating parents out of assets, then discarding them. But the law is fighting back." I sat up straighter. I was not just a sad old woman in a motel room. I was a statistic. I was a victim of a crime. I spread the papers out on the cheap floral bedspread. My hands were trembling. Not from fear anymore, but from adrenaline. I looked at the signature on the deed, my signature, next to Daniel's. "They think I am weak," I whispered, smoothing out the crease in the contract. "They think I am just a confused old woman they can toss in a dumpster." I looked at the phone number for a legal aid clinic. The news report flashed on the screen and wrote it down on the back of a motel notepad. "If they see me as a parasite," I said, my voice hardening into steel, "then I will show them that this old parasite still knows how to bite." The next morning, I walked into the Ridgeview Senior Hub with my purse clutched tight against my chest. I did not go there to play bingo or knit scarves. I went there because I needed to know if there was a shelter that would take a woman with a pension check that was too small for a real apartment, but too big for government aid. I met Olivia, a social worker who looked young enough to be my granddaughter, but had eyes that had seen too much of the world. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting, her pen moving fast across her notepad. "Mrs. Hayes," Olivia said, looking up with a fierce expression. "You are asking about shelters, but we need to talk about the law. What your son did has a name. It is called an illegal eviction. Within an hour." She had sent me to a building downtown with a peeling sign that read, Frontier Justice Legal Aid. The waiting room was full of people who looked like they were holding their breath, waiting for bad news. I was introduced to Miguel Torres, a lawyer with sharp features and a serious demeanor, and his colleague, Rachel Klein, a white woman with a kind face but a posture that suggested she did not back down easily. I laid my wrinkled blue folder on their desk. Miguel opened it, his eyes scanning the dense legal text while Rachel took notes. The room was silent for a long time, the only sound being the hum of the air conditioner. Then, Miguel stopped. He tapped his finger on a paragraph near the bottom of the third page. "Did they read this?" Miguel asked, looking at me over his glasses. "Right here. The deed establishes a joint tenancy with right of survivorship. But this addendum, it grants you lifetime residency rights based on your initial capital contribution. Any change to the living arrangement requires your written consent." They told me the paper did not matter, I said, feeling a bitter laugh rising in my throat. Monica said. She said it was just a formality. Rachel leaned forward. "Loretta, I need you to tell me exactly how they got you out. Did they touch you? Did they threaten you?" "They dragged my suitcase," I replied, staring at my hands. "They screamed. They put my things in trash bags. I want you to write it all down," Rachel said. "Every word you remember, every date, every time they made you feel unsafe. Memory is a legal weapon. Loretta, use it." We spent the next hour dissecting my life. When Rachel asked about how I handled my mail, I hesitated. "Well," I said slowly, "Monica always got the mail. She told me, she said it was better if she handled the paperwork to save me the trouble. She said old eyes miss the fine print." Miguel stopped writing. He exchanged a dark look with Rachel. "She never let you see the property tax statements or the bank notices?" "No," I said. "Is that important?" "It is when people are hiding things," Miguel said, later that afternoon. Olivia stopped by my motel room. She handed me a stack of pamphlets about elder abuse hotlines and tenant rights. It felt strange to see my life printed out in bullet points on a glossy brochure. But it also felt like armor. "You are not alone in this," Olivia told me. "If they try to intimidate you again, you call this number. It goes straight to the district attorney's special unit, back at the legal office." Things were moving faster than I expected. Rachel had been searching online for mentions of my address or family name, trying to gauge if there was any public record of the incident. She turned her laptop screen toward me. "Loretta, look at this," Rachel said. It was a video posted in a local community group called Ridgeview Neighborhood Watch. The caption read, "Heartbreaking scene on Maple Street today. Watch how they treat their mother." It was blurry, shot from across the street through blinds. But the audio was clear. I heard Monica screaming old Parasite. I saw Daniel throw my bag. My neighbor Barbara. I whispered. Her daughter must have posted it. "This is golden evidence," Rachel said, saving the file. "It proves the hostility. It proves the eviction was forceful, not voluntary." But the real shock came when Miguel walked back into the room holding a printout from the county recorder's office. His face was pale, his jaw set tight. "I had a suspicion about why Monica did not want you seeing the mail," Miguel said, placing the paper in front of me. "I looked up the title history of your house. 1 year ago, a home equity line of credit was taken out against the property for $50,000. I stared at him, confused. "I never agreed to a loan," I never signed anything. Miguel pointed to a digital copy of a signature on the bottom of the page. It looked like my name, but the loop of the L was wrong. It was shaky, an imitation of how I wrote 10 years ago. Not now. If you did not sign this, Miguel said, his voice low and dangerous. Then they forged your signature to strip the equity out of the house you paid for. If that is true, then we are not just talking about ethics, Mrs. Hayes. We are talking about a crime. The air inside Prairie State Bank was freezing, a sharp contrast to the humid heat rising off the asphalt outside. Rachel walked beside me, her heels clicking on the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. We sat down across from a loan officer, a young man who looked nervous as he pulled up the file related to the address on Maple Street. Rachel presented the power of attorney form I had signed just hours before, granting the legal team access to investigate the lien on my home. Mrs. Hayes, the officer said, turning his computer screen slightly away from us. I see the home equity line of credit here. It was finalized 12 months ago for $50,000. The funds were disbursed to a joint account. I need to see the signature page, Rachel said, her voice leaving no room for argument. The officer hesitated, then printed a copy of the final agreement. He slid it across the mahogany desk. I stared at the bottom line. There, in black ink, was my name Loretta Hayes. But it was wrong. That is not how I sign my name anymore. I whispered, my finger hovering over the paper. My arthritis. It makes my loop on the L shaky. This is smooth. It looks like how I signed things 10 years ago. Miguel, who was reviewing the scanned documents back at the office, called Rachel's phone. She put him on speaker. I am looking at the digital metadata and the scan resolution. Miguel's voice crackled through the phone. Loretta, they did not just forge it. They traced it. The pressure points are too even. They must have dug through your old legal papers, found the original deed from when you bought the house, and traced that signature onto this loan application. They stole your past to rob your future. A sick feeling churned in my stomach. I realized then that the invasion of my privacy had started long before they threw my clothes on the lawn. They had been rummaging through my wooden box while I was sleeping or cooking their dinner. We returned to the legal aid office, where the atmosphere had shifted from administrative to combative. Rachel had been busy. She had not only secured the original high-definition video from my neighbor Barbara, but had also subpoenaed footage from a doorbell camera across the street. Miguel set up his laptop and turned the screen toward me. I need you to watch this. Loretta, I know it is hard. I watched the screen. I saw the front door of my house fly open. I saw Daniel drag my suitcase out and shove it so hard it tipped over the edge of the porch. Then I saw Monica. She came out with 2 black trash bags and heaved them down the stairs. On the video, I looked small and confused. Clutching my chest, I saw myself crying, my mouth moving in a plea that the camera could not pick up. I covered my face with my hands. I look so pathetic, I said, my voice breaking. I look like a beggar. No, Miguel said firmly. You look like a victim. The court does not trust stories that are too perfect. Loretta, they trust messy, ugly truth. This video proves you did not leave voluntarily. It proves distress. Rachel then placed a stack of printed emails on the desk. They had been included in the supplementary loan documents the bank had surrendered. Communications between Monica and a financial advisor regarding the purpose of the loan. Read this, Rachel said, pointing to a highlighted paragraph. I read Monica's words. We need to liquidate some equity to cover debts. The cost of maintaining an elderly dependent in the home is becoming a strain, and we are looking at restructuring ownership to facilitate a sale once we can transition her out. She admitted it, I said, my hands shaking with a fresh wave of anger. She admitted I was there. She admitted they planned to sell the house from under me. And she called you a dependent. Rachel noted, but you were not a dependent. Were you? No, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a plastic envelope I had salvaged from my box. Inside were yellowed carbon copies of bank transfers from 5 years ago, when Daniel lost his job at the factory. For 2 years? Who do you think paid the mortgage? Who paid for the groceries I did? I transferred $1,500 every month from my pension and my savings. Miguel took the slips, his eyes widening. This destroys their narrative. You were not a freeloader. You were the safety net. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the atmosphere in the office was electric. Miguel was typing furiously, finalizing the civil complaint. We were filing for illegal eviction, financial elder abuse, and fraud. He also drafted a cease and desist letter, demanding immediate restoration of my tenancy or a massive financial settlement. I am sending this via courier today, Miguel said, sealing the thick envelope. They will get it during dinner. I sat back in the worn leather chair, looking at the stack of evidence, the forged signature, the video of my humiliation, the emails plotting my removal, and the receipts of my sacrifice. For the first time since standing on that cold porch, I did not feel cold. Miguel looked at me, his expression serious. Loretta, up until yesterday, you were scared of them. You were scared of what they would do next. Yes, I answered. I was, well, things have changed, Miguel said, placing his hand on the file. From now on, they are the ones who should be afraid of a knock on the door. My phone rang at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, vibrating against the laminate table in the small meeting room at the Ridgeview Senior Hub. The screen flashed the name Daniel. A week ago, seeing that name would have made me eager to answer, hoping he needed a recipe or a favor. Now, it felt like a summons to court. I looked at Olivia, who was sitting across from me. She nodded and tapped the record button on her own phone, placing it silently between us. Colorado is a one-party consent state, and today, I was consenting to be the witness to my own life. I swiped the green icon and put the call on speaker. Mom Daniel's voice filled the small room, shrill and tight. Mom, what are you doing? I just got a courier at the house. Why are you bringing lawyers into a family matter? He sounded incredulous, as if I had broken a sacred rule by defending myself. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady, the way a teacher speaks to an unruly child. It stopped being a family matter when you put my clothes in garbage bags on the front lawn. Daniel, I said. There was a pause, a ragged intake of breath on the other end. Monica was she was impulsive. He stammered, his tone shifting from anger to a wheedling plea. She has been under so much stress at work. You know how she gets. But you have to understand, Mum. Having you there? It was putting a lot of financial pressure on us. You were costing us money we didn't have. I felt a cold flash of anger, but I did not raise my voice. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting the recorder catch the weight of his lie. Financial pressure, I asked softly. Daniel? Who paid the $80,000 deposit for that house? Who paid the mortgage for 24 months when you lost your job at the factory? Was that pressure? Or was that survival? That is ancient history, Daniel snapped, his facade cracking. You always bring up money. You think you can buy control. Monica was right. You just sit there and absorb resources. She called me a parasite. I cut in, my voice sharp as a scalpel. She screamed. No space here. Old parasite. Do you agree with her? Daniel, is your mother a parasite? The line went dead silent. I could hear him breathing. The heavy, panicked breaths of a man realizing the narrative was slipping away from him. If you continue with this lawsuit, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a low, ugly growl. If you drag us through court, then I am done. You will not be my mother anymore. You will never see your granddaughter again. It was the threat I had feared most my entire life, but strangely, hearing it now, it did not break me. It only confirmed that the son I loved had left the building a long time ago. I think you made that choice when you locked the door. Daniel, I said, and I ended the call. I looked at Olivia. She stopped the recording and saved the file. We have it, she whispered. While Daniel was trying to bully me, the consequences of their cruelty were starting to ripple outward. Rachel had told me that morning that the video of Monica screaming at me had found its way to the ethics department at Urban Haven stores. A massive retail chain does not like viral videos of their HR managers abusing the elderly. Monica was under investigation. That evening, a knock came at my motel door. I checked the peephole and saw Monica. She was not screaming this time. She was holding a wicker basket wrapped in cellophane, filled with fruit and muffins. I opened the door but left the security chain on, creating a 2-inch gap between us. Loretta Monica beamed, though the smile did not reach her terrified eyes. I brought you some things. I thought we could talk. Just us girls. Without the lawyers. What do you want? Monica, I asked. Look, I know things got heated, she said, shifting her weight nervously. It was a misunderstanding. A terrible, unfortunate misunderstanding. But this lawsuit, Loretta, it could ruin Daniel's future. It could ruin my career. Surely you do not want to destroy us over a little argument. I looked at the expensive basket. Then at her face. She was not sorry. She was afraid. She was afraid of losing her job, her reputation, and the house she had tried to steal. It is not a misunderstanding when you forge a signature. Monica, I said quietly. Her smile vanished instantly. Her face went pale, the makeup standing out like a mask. I don't know what you are talking about, she stammered. Please, Loretta, take the basket. Let's just work this out. I don't want your muffins, I said. I want what is mine. I closed the door in her face. I heard her stand there for a long minute, her breathing ragged on the other side of the thin wood, before her heels clicked away down the hallway. I turned back to the room where Olivia was sitting on the bed, taking notes. They are scared, I said, feeling a new kind of strength settling in my bones. They think they came here to negotiate. But really, they just came here to show me exactly where to cut. The lawsuit turned my name into a topic of conversation at every breakfast table in Ridgeview. Someone had leaked the details of the filing to the local community Facebook group, and suddenly, the private tragedy of the Hayes family was public property. While a few people commented that caring for the elderly is exhausting, the majority were furious. Strangers sent messages to my lawyer offering to bring me groceries. The pressure was building, not just in the courtroom, but in the grocery store aisles and the parking lots where my son and daughter-in-law could no longer hide. Then came the first major victory. Dr. Evans, who had treated me for 20 years before he retired, heard about the case. He voluntarily sent a notarized letter to Miguel's office. It stated clearly that my cognitive faculties were exceptional for her age and that I showed zero signs of dementia. That single piece of paper destroyed Daniel's planned defense. He could not claim he was protecting a confused old woman when a medical professional declared I was sharper than he was. Things got worse for them. Rachel called me with news that Urban Haven Stores had placed Monica on unpaid administrative leave pending the investigation into the video. With Daniel's salary being mediocre at best, the loss of Monica's income turned their desperation into panic. The house was no longer just a place to live. It was their only financial life raft, and I was the one poking holes in it. Miguel arranged a mediation session before the trial, a final chance to settle. We met in a sterile conference room with a long mahogany table that felt like a battlefield. Daniel looked tired, his shirt unironed. Monica sat stiffly, her eyes red-rimmed but full of venom. Miguel laid out our terms. Here are the options. 1. You restore Mrs. Hayes to her room immediately, with a new, court-enforced contract protecting her rights. 2. You buy out her share of the property at current market value, plus damages for emotional distress and legal fees. That totals roughly $150,000. Daniel let out a choked sound. He leaned forward, trying to catch my eye, putting on the face of the exhausted, martyred son. Mom? Please, Daniel said, his voice trembling with a performance of grief. We don't have that kind of money. You know how hard I work. The cost of raising Jenna, the cost of your medical bills. It was drowning us. I only wanted to save the family. I looked at him, and the guilt that usually softened my heart was gone. I opened my notebook. My medical bills are covered by Medicare. Daniel, I said, my voice steady. And as for the cost of raising Jenna, who bought her school clothes for the last 3 years I did, who watched her every Friday and Saturday night so you two could go to the casino I did. You did not drown because of me. You drowned because you refused to swim. Monica slammed her hand on the table, her composure shattering. You have no idea. We have invested into that house more than you ever did. We put everything into it. The room went deadly silent. Miguel looked up from his papers, his eyes locking onto Monica like a hawk spotting a mouse. Invested, Miguel asked softly. Are you referring to the $50,000 you stripped from the home's equity, the loan you took out against Mrs. Hayes's property share without her consent? Monica's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She realized she had just walked into a trap. That was for home repairs. Daniel's stamina, sweat beading on his forehead. We will see the receipts in court, Rachel said, closing her folder. The mediation ended in failure. The mediator declared an impasse, and a trial date was set for the following month. As we walked to the elevator, my knees felt weak. A trial meant testifying. It meant facing them in front of a judge. I am scared, Rachel. I admitted. What if the judge believes them? They refused a reasonable offer, Rachel said, pressing the elevator button. Judges hate that. And after Monica's slip-up today, they do not have a defense, Loretta. They only have excuses. That Sunday, I went back to my old church for the first time since the eviction. I had been hiding in my motel room, ashamed of my homelessness. But today I walked into the sanctuary with my head up. After the service, the pastor and the women of the senior choir surrounded me. I did not cry. I did not whisper. I told them exactly what had happened. I am fighting back. I told the group, gripping my hymn book, not just for my room, but because people think we are weak. They think we will just fade away quietly. I need to show them that we do not fade. Looking at their nodding faces, I realized my anger had transformed into something larger. I was no longer just Loretta fighting for a bedroom. I was fighting for every parent who had been used, discarded, and silenced. The shame was gone. In its place was the cold, hard resolve of justice. With the help of the Ridgeview Senior Hub, I finally checked out of the Sunset Lodge. I moved into a studio apartment on the second floor of a low-income housing complex for seniors. It was small, just a single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom that smelled of bleach and fresh paint. But when I turned the key in the lock, the air inside tasted sweet. For the first time in years, I stood in a space that was entirely mine. There were no boxes of unwanted junk shoving me into a corner. There were no heavy sighs from a daughter-in-law echoing down the hall. I began to rebuild my life in quiet, deliberate layers. I bought a pack of yellow sticky notes and placed them on the refrigerator, reminding myself to buy milk or call the clinic, simply because I could. I unpacked the wooden box. I hung a photo of Henry on the wall above my small table, and right next to it, I taped a picture of Daniel from when he was 10 years old, grinning in a baseball uniform. Looking at his young face used to break my heart. But now, it felt like studying a stranger. I was not erasing the memory of my son, but I was refusing to let the ghost of who he used to be hurt me any longer. "You are doing great, Loretta," Olivia told me one afternoon at the hub. "But to win this, we need to make sure you are as sharp with technology as you are with your memory." She signed me up for a digital skills class. I sat in a computer lab with 6 other women, learning how to scan documents, save files to the cloud, and check court dockets online. It was frustrating at first, my fingers stiff on the keyboard, but I kept going. Every time I successfully attached a file to an email, it felt like I was loading a bullet into a gun. I was proving to myself, and to the world, that I was not the confused, obsolete old woman Monica claimed I was. One evening, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jenna, my 16-year-old granddaughter. "Grandma, I am so sorry." The message read, "I should have said something when they put your bags out. I was just scared. I miss you." I stared at the glowing screen, my chest tightening. Jenna was a child caught in the crossfire, paralyzed by the authority of her parents. I typed back slowly, choosing my words with the care of a surgeon. "I do not want you to take sides. Jenna, I just want you to remember one thing. The way people treat those who are weaker than them says much more about them than it does about the weak person. You be strong." While I was finding my peace, Daniel was losing his mind. He began sending me a barrage of emails, sometimes 5 or 6 a day. At 10 in the morning, he would send a message begging for forgiveness, claiming he missed my cooking. By 2 in the afternoon, the tone would shift to anger, accusing me of ruining his reputation and bankrupting the family. By dinner time, he would be bargaining, suggesting we settle this privately without the courts involved. I sat in Miguel's office, showing him the printouts. "Do not reply to a single one," Miguel advised, tapping the stack of papers. Every time he flips from begging to threatening, he is painting a portrait of instability. We are just going to save these as PDF files. He is doing our work for us. The night before the trial, I stood in front of the cheap plastic mirror on the back of my bathroom door. I was wearing my best black dress, the one I used to wear to Henry's company dinners. I smoothed the fabric over my hips and took a deep breath. I needed to practice. I needed to hear my own voice fill the room. "My name is Loretta Hayes," I said to my reflection. My voice was shaky, thin as paper. I cleared my throat and tried again. "My name is Loretta Hayes," I said, louder this time. "I am not a burden. I am not a guest." I looked into my own eyes, seeing the lines of age not as flaws, but as a map of everything I had survived. "My son forgot something important," I whispered to the mirror, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "He forgot that his mother still has a voice, and he is about to hear it roar." The hallway of the county courthouse was a river of grey suits and echoing footsteps. But I walked through it feeling like I was moving through still water. I wore my simple black dress, the one with the high collar, and pinned to my chest was Henry's silver brooch, shaped like a soaring bird. Miguel was on my left, Rachel on my right. We moved as a phalanx. I was no longer the woman shivering in a motel parking lot. I was a soldier, entering a cold battlefield with my generals beside me. Daniel and Monica arrived 5 minutes late. They burst through the double doors looking like they were wearing costumes of success. Daniel was in a suit that was too shiny, and Monica wore a pearl necklace that I knew she had bought on credit. But their eyes gave them away deep, dark circles and the jittery energy of people who knew the walls were closing in. Their lawyer, a man with a comb-over and a loud tie, started his opening statement by painting a picture of filial piety. "Your Honor," he said, spreading his hands wide. My clients were simply acting out of concern. Mrs. Hayes was becoming difficult to manage. They wanted her to live somewhere. Safer. This was an intervention, not an eviction. Miguel did not say a word. He simply connected his laptop to the courtroom monitor and pressed play. The silence in the room was shattered by the recorded voice of Monica screaming, "No space here." Old Parasite leave, I watched the judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. She did not blink. On the screen, the video switched to the doorbell footage from across the street. It showed Daniel dragging my suitcase like a sack of cement and Monica tossing my black trash bags down the stairs. There was no safety in those images. There was only contempt. The judge's frown deepened, and she began writing furiously on her notepad. Monica took the stand, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. "I was just emotional," Monica stammered, trying to conjure tears. "Families fight. I didn't mean those words." Miguel walked to the podium, holding a single piece of paper. "You claim it was heat of the moment, Mrs. Hayes. Yet, 3 months ago, you sent this email to your financial advisor. You wrote, and I quote, 'The old lady is a line-item expense we need to cut. She is a cost burden that is eating into our lifestyle.' Is that an emotional outburst? Or is that a calculation?" Monica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The air in the room felt thin. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, my legs trembling slightly, but I kept my chin high. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. "Tell us about that night, Loretta," Rachel said softly. "I was washing my hands," I said. my voice carrying clearly to the back of the room. I can still smell the lavender soap. I turned around, and they were there with the bags. I heard my grandson's television playing cartoons in the other room, and I prayed he wouldn't come out to see his father throw his grandmother away. The courtroom was deadly silent. I saw the court reporter pause to wipe her eye. The defense lawyer tried to pivot. He stood up, adjusting his tie. Mrs. Hayes, isn't it true that you often forget things, that you get confused about who paid for what Rachel was on her feet instantly? Objection. Relevance. It goes to credibility. Your Honor? The lawyer argued. Rachel pulled a document from her briefcase. Your Honor, we have a sworn affidavit from Dr. Evans, a neurologist, dated 2 weeks ago. Loretta Hayes scored 30 out of 30 on her cognitive assessment. Her memory is statistically better than the average 40-year-old. The defense lawyer sat down, defeated. But the final blow was yet to come. A representative from Prairie State Bank took the stand. He looked uncomfortable as he held up the loan documents for the home equity line of credit. Mr. Henderson, Miguel asked, did Loretta Hayes sign these documents in your presence? No, the banker admitted, looking at his shoes. Mrs. Monica Hayes brought the papers in. She said her mother-in-law had already signed them at home because she was indisposed. We processed it, based on that trust. The judge stopped writing. She slowly lifted her head and looked at Daniel and Monica. Her stare was colder than the winter wind on my porch. So, the judge said, her voice icy. You are telling me that these defendants not only evicted an elder from her own home, but used a forged signature to strip equity from her property. She did not wait for an answer. She shuffled her papers and looked down at us. I have heard enough, the judge declared. I find that the defendants engaged in an illegal eviction and financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. I am ordering full restitution of legal fees and a compensation payment of $20,000 for emotional distress. Daniel let out a gasp, burying his face in his hands. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am issuing an ultimatum. Either you restore Mrs. Hayes to the property immediately under a court-monitored occupancy agreement, or you will place the home on the market within 30 days. Upon sale, Mrs. Hayes will receive her initial $80,000 contribution, plus 50% of the remaining equity. You have 48 hours to decide. I looked at Daniel and Monica. Their faces had turned a ghostly white. They had wanted the house so badly they were willing to throw me away for it. Now, because of their greed, they were about to lose it all. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom had barely swung shut behind us when Daniel lunged for my arm. For the first time since this nightmare began, the tears streaming down his face were real. He was not crying because he was sad. He was crying because he was ruined. He looked at me with the desperate eyes of a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. Mom. Please, Daniel choked out, his hands trembling as he tried to hold onto my sleeve. Don't make us sell the house. Just come back home. We can set up the room exactly how you like it. I promise. I will be better. I will be the son you deserve. Before I could answer, Monica pushed in beside him. Her makeup was smeared, and the arrogant tilt of her chin was gone, replaced by a frantic, calculating squint. She knew the internal investigation at her company was closing in, and losing the house would be the final nail in her career's coffin. Loretta, listen to reason, Monica hissed, her voice shaking but still trying to manipulate me. If we sell now, We lose everything. The market is down, and the legal fees are eating us alive. Let's just sign a private agreement. You don't need the court watching us. Do you? We can work out a payment plan. I looked at them. For a fleeting heartbeat, I saw the ghost of the little boy I used to walk to school, the one who used to hold my hand so tight when we crossed the street. I felt that old, familiar pull of a mother's instinct to fix everything, to smooth over the cracks and absorb the pain so her child didn't have to suffer. But then, another image superimposed itself over his face. I saw the video of my suitcase tumbling down the porch stairs. I felt the cold wind of the motel parking lot. I heard the word Parasite ringing in my ears. I pulled my arm away from Daniel's grip. The movement was slow, deliberate, and final. "Miguel," I said, turning my back on my son to address my lawyer. "I will never step foot in that house again. It is tainted. Tell the judge I demand the immediate sale of the property under strict court supervision. I want my $80,000 plus my share of the equity wire transferred to a secure account that only I control." Daniel let out a strangled sob. But Miguel was not finished. He pulled a thick document from his briefcase, the paperwork we had finalized just that morning. "There is one more thing," Miguel said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Mrs. Hayes has executed a new will and established a living trust. As of today, Daniel, you and Monica have been removed as beneficiaries. The bulk of the estate, including the proceeds from this lawsuit, is placed in a trust for your daughter, Jenna, to access when she turns 25. The remainder is designated for the Frontier Justice Legal Aid Fund to help other victims of elder abuse." The color drained from Daniel's face so completely he looked like a corpse. "You are cutting me out," he screamed, his voice echoing off the marble walls of the hallway. "I am your only son. How can you do this to your own blood?" I looked him dead in the eye, my expression as calm as a frozen lake. "I didn't cut you out, Daniel," I said softly. "You cut yourself out of my heart the moment you stood silent and watched your wife kick me into the street. You made your choice. Now I am making mine. 3 weeks later, I stood on the sidewalk across the street from the house on Maple Street. I watched as a moving truck idled in the driveway. Daniel and Monica were hauling boxes out, their shoulders slumped. The house had sold quickly, and after the court took my share and the legal fees, they were left with almost nothing. They were moving into a cramped 2-bedroom rental apartment on the edge of town, a place far less glamorous than what they felt they deserved. Mrs. Barbara was watching from her window. A few other neighbors stood on their lawns, their arms crossed, watching the Parasites get evicted by their own greed. It was a public humiliation, the kind of social shame they had tried to inflict on me, now returned to them tenfold. I turned away and walked to my car. I did not look back. An hour later, I unlocked the door to my new studio apartment. It was small, but it was flooded with afternoon sunlight. I placed a small pot of rosemary on the windowsill and hung the court judgment inside the cabinet door, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of my own strength. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, the dark roast aroma filling the air. I looked at myself in the mirror, sipping the hot liquid, and whispered the truth that would guide the rest of my life. There is no room here for people who call me a parasite. If anyone finds this space too tight, they are the ones who have to step outside. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I truly appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. I'd love to hear where you guys are listening from. So please drop a comment down below with your city or country. It's always amazing to see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this story and want to support the channel, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people who need to hear it.